President Trump says we have to have Greenland for national security and that European leaders have to get this done. But a 1951 agreement already grants the U.S. military access to Greenland. State Department Principal Deputy Spokesperson Tommy Pigott is here for more on this whole issue. Tommy, thank you for joining us. You know, as it stands now, NATO would be obligated to respond under Article 5 if Russia or China attacked Greenland. So what specifically could the U.S. do if it controlled Greenland that it can't do now?
Well, the president has outlined a lot of this in terms of the Golden Dome setup that would be necessary, the security of the Arctic, the investments we see from the United States. And ultimately, this is about having hard conversations about our security with our allies and our partners. And that's who you have these conversations with. It's similar in some ways to the fact that you had President Trump calling on a 5% increase for GDP from NATO allies. And we've seen our allies step up and provide that, which has led to a stronger alliance. So the president's been clear that the United States having Greenland would be better for the security of the Greenlanders, for the United States, for NATO as a whole.
Walk me through why. I just talked to a Danish minister there, a member, and she says the U.S. can build that Golden Dome infrastructure without taking over Greenland. They already have the permission to do it.
Well, President Trump's been very clear in outlining that there are certain capabilities the United States has and capabilities that can be best implemented if the United States were to own Greenland. That's just the fact of the matter, and it's something the president has argued very persuasively. And ultimately, this is about having a stronger NATO, stronger allies, stronger security for the United States, for Greenlanders, for NATO. And it really goes back to this whole year that we've seen from President Trump of having these conversations, raising these issues, and raising these issues in a way that lead to concrete results, just like that 5% burden sharing that we saw with NATO that led to a revitalized NATO alliance and was only possible because of the president's leadership.
And let's talk a little bit more about NATO, because some are concerned that Trump threatening military action against a NATO ally could lead to an end of the alliance. I want to play some of what a former Danish minister said on ABC News last night.
Well, Trump, we are with you. We want to be your allies. We have the same adversaries in the Arctic, Russia mainly, but also China. We are investing. You got your win. You know, let's work together instead of threatening each other. It's really making all of the West less strong. We should be together and not fighting each other. I'm sure that Putin and Xi are just looking at us right now with a small smile on their face, and we shouldn't be doing this.
So she says Putin and Xi are smiling because NATO is fighting each other. What's your response to the idea that this is weakening and maybe even dismantling eventually NATO to Putin and Xi's advantage?
Well, President Trump has done more to revitalize the NATO alliance than anybody, including, like I mentioned, those 5% GDP defense contributions that lead to a stronger NATO alliance. So that's what President Trump has done. That's only possible because of his leadership. And this is about addressing modern threats in the Arctic, essential to our security. President Trump has outlined that. And when this happens, when President Trump is able to acquire Greenland, as his goal is, that will lead to better security for NATO, for Greenlanders, for the United States. This is about addressing these modern day threats the United States faces.
And what happens if the president orders troops there against a NATO ally?
Well, look, ultimately, as the press secretary and president have both said, they're not ruling out any sort of options, but he's also been clear about conversations to acquire Greenland. And he's also been clear that these conversations are going to continue in Davos. So I'm not going to talk about hypotheticals or speculate, but the president has been clear that he wants to see a strong NATO that has spending and also a NATO that's able to defend against modern threats.
President Trump is also set to hold a formal signing ceremony to constitute the Gaza Board of Peace. But this charter draft circulated online doesn't directly mention Gaza, and it appears to signal a broader mandate. Now some are speculating that Trump's trying to build an alternative to the United Nations. Is he?
Well, look, this Board of Peace was something that was under a UN mandate that, again, was only possible because of President Trump's leadership. The global coalition that we saw to bring about that ceasefire in Gaza was only possible because of President Trump. And we saw the release of hostages. We saw the humanitarian assistance that was able to enter Gaza without being looted by Hamas. And we've seen the president lead on ending 8 conflicts in just a year. That's the president's leadership here. The president's clear he wants the UN to go back to basics in terms of solving peace, being part of these discussions. Unfortunately, UN hasn't been. But President Trump's leadership has ended these conflicts, and he's looking to continue that, to build on that progress and see lasting peace.
Tommy, President Trump is also calling for new leadership in Iran. He recently said the best decision the Ayatollah ever made was not hanging more than 800 people. If those executions were to go forward, would the U.S. launch a military operation there, and what would that look like?
Well, I'm not going to rule out options for the president or speculate on what may happen, but the president is watching this very closely. He's spoken very directly to this. And this, again, goes back to from day one of this administration over the last year. We've seen a reimplementation of a maximum pressure policy. We've seen a regime in Iran that has wasted its wealth. Instead of on water, food, and energy, infrastructure for its people, it's wasted its wealth on malign activities, funding terrorist proxies, a nuclear program that was obliterated by the president. The president has a strong policy here. He's monitoring this closely, and he wants to see the regime end these malign activities.
Tommy, it's been a year since President Trump took office. He promised to end the war in Ukraine on day one. Now these meetings in Davos that were supposed to focus on Ukraine are being derailed to focus on Greenland. Where does the Ukraine peace process go from here? And how confident are you Russia and Ukraine can come to a deal?
Well, like I said, the president's ended 8 conflicts in just a year. And when it comes to Ukraine, he's spoken about this as well. We've seen engagement from the highest levels of this administration with one fundamental goal, and that is ending the conflict, seeing people being able to go home and be with their families, ending the bloodshed. The president, the secretary have all been involved in this, many members of this administration, to try to see a negotiated settlement. We're having those conversations, getting those inputs from both sides to see if that negotiated settlement is possible. Ultimately, this is up to the parties. But again, the driving motivation here for the president is to see an end to the bloodshed.
All right, State Department Principal Deputy Spokesperson Tommy Pigott. Tommy, I have so many more questions for you, but I know I have to let you go. Thanks for your time.
Thanks for having me on.